All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with Ricardo Beato. Welcome. Thank you for coming back, man. It's a double pleasure to have you on because, of course, you're one of my favorite guests to have on this podcast, but also I feel like you're one of these people, like many people, who's so damn busy that the podcast gives me an excuse to catch up with
Well,
you. It's
well,
great.
anytime, Chris. Always love chatting with you. So I appreciate being here.
Well, things have taken off since the last time we spoke. You were on a it's like you were on a plane at 30,000 feet that suddenly turned into a rocket ship, and now you're in orbit somewhere. In terms of your YouTube career, I think last time we spoke, you had a high profile, or several high profile guests. I remember you'd spoken to Victor Wooten at some point
Yep.
back in the archives, and oh shit, I forget his name. The guitarist. Do you feel
Yeah,
like
Peter
I do?
Frampton.
Peter Frampton. Yeah, you had spoken with Peter Frampton, but the whole high profile guest thing seems to have really taken off now. With Pat Metheny and Sting, and it's just you're on a roll. Is that? I mean, it's a funny thing having famous guests. It's something I deal with on the podcast because a lot of times I'm not that interested because they're so rehearsed in terms of their conversation. But with a musician, I imagine that doesn't really come in unless there's a weird personality thing. But I mean, you know their work so well, so that makes it even more interesting for you, I suppose.
It does. Your average, I guess, music interviewer is not going to be as well versed, especially with the people, with Sting or Brian May or Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny is a great
Brian May,
example
right.
that I know every one of Pat's records. I know all the records that Pat listened to. I saw Pat play in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, so the depth of my experience with his music or Sting's music or Queen's music, is so great that I'd like to think I'm able to come up with questions that. Well, I ask all the things that I've always wondered that you never read in interviews. When I interviewed Ron Carter, that was a big thing for me, who played bass with Miles Davis, and I asked Ron things that nobody. How far apart did you guys stand in the studio? Now, I want to imagine what a Miles Davis recording session was like, but how many people were there for it? Well, Ron Carter was there, and. What was it like? There were no cameras there. How far apart did you stand? How did you mic the bass? Nobody asks them things like that, but these are things that I think musicians want to know.
Yeah. Yeah, it brings a better experience to non-musicians as well who are listening. I mean, watching that Sting thing, and you can tell me if I'm projecting or imagining things, but watching you interacting with Sting was so interesting because I felt like for the first 15 minutes or so, I don't know if he knew who you were or was familiar with your channel, or if his publicist just said, hey, this is the guy, you got a record coming out, talk to this guy, he's got a big audience, whatever. But it really felt to me like his demeanor toward you changed appreciably. And I remember there was one moment where he was talking about a band he had put together. I don't know if it was the Soul Cages.
It was on Dream of the Blue Turtles, the first record.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was like, and then on bass we had and you were like,
Daryl Jones.
You had his name right
Daryl
there.
Jones, yeah.
Yeah. You're right. And then and he was like, oh yeah, good for you. And then it was like, yeah, and the percussionist,
The drummer,
was,
Omar
and you
Hakim.
named that.
Yes, exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And there was this moment, he was sort of like, I remember the position, like he had his head sort of resting on his hand at an angle. And there was this moment where he just sort of like looked at you like, what am I looking at here? Who is this guy? I mean, did you feel that in the room? Was there a shift where he was like, "Oh, you're one of us. I don't need to translate to talk to
So, well,
you."
the backstory is just before when Sting came into the interview. So Sting follows my channel. His publicist said Sting wanted me to personally reach out to you about this, right? And
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
so one of my old friends who I used to play with is Vinny Colaiuta, who played in Sting's band for 10 years. And so Sting knew that Vinny and I had been friends forever. So the first thing he said to me, he said, "Great to meet you, Rick. How long have you known Vinny?" And I said, "Oh man, we played together in the mid '80s." And Dominic Miller, who's been in Sting's band, and Dominic and Sting started at the same time in 1990 on the Soul Cages. So right off the bat, we had that connection. But Sting had just come from the dentist, and he told me, he's like, "I had gas, whatever, they laughing gas or whatever." And he said, "I needed a cappuccino to wake up because it's still not worn off." So for the first 15 minutes, it was really him kind of, he says, "I just had a new bridge done," or something. And it's funny that he talked about a
No.
bridge, and then we talked about bridges in the interview. It must have been on his mind.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah, so it took
funny.
him a minute to kind of collect his
All
collect his
right.
thoughts. So
So I was totally projecting.
no, I
I
think
was
that most
I
people thought that, actually thought that Sting was that it took him a minute to warm up, which it did actually. I mean, that was I think part of the reason.
Yeah. Do you have, you didn't seem to be starstruck at all. Do you have any kind of nervousness that's related to the level of fame of who you're
Not
talking to?
really. I don't. I always think of it like I'm talking to another fellow musician. So
Right.
it just happens to be Sting, one of the most famous people. But I don't think of, I don't, it doesn't really, I'm not, it doesn't affect me in that way. It doesn't, I kind of can separate out. I am so fascinated by his work. I just want to kind of get in there and talk about things that, get as much time as I can to find out these things I've always wondered about him. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. I remember one of the first videos of yours I watched was about the police. I forget which song it
every little thing she
was.
does is magic is one of the first "What Makes This
Yeah.
Song Greats" that I did. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I remember I shared that with my buddy Mike, who I told you about, who went to Cornell and was in Ithaca at the same time you were there, and I sent it to him, and I may have even sent you his response, but he was like, "Holy shit! I've been listening to this song my whole life. I had no idea that there was something you pointed out with where they sped up the tape or something after they'd recorded. There's something with the tempo that they had adjusted, and he was like, I knew something was off on that song in an artful way, but I could never put my finger on it.
What's fun
Yeah,
about that with that song is that when I asked him about it in the interview, that I always heard the backstory that Stuart Copeland didn't want to play drums on it because Sting had already demoed the song and he didn't think it was a Police sounding song, right? And so it took Sting a while, as he told me, to convince him to do it. And then I said in the interview, I said, "That's one of Stewart's best drum takes." And Sting's like, "Yeah, it is." And that was also their first number one song. So Sting had a very, I mean, that was on their fourth record. They finally had a number one song. Yeah.
Oh, I thought Roxanne went to number one.
Roxanne, I think, peaked at 35, but the Police
Oh,
became a massively big band then because of it. But as a
right.
single, it did not. So they had that was their first number one. Yeah. So in the fourth record they had their first number one song. But Sting really had a knack for knowing what kind of songs. He knew that was going to be a hit. But it's really an unlikely commercial song because it's so weird. And Sting's songs are so weird. They really are.
They're all
They're all
weird.
weird, but they're
Yeah.
amazing. He could take these
Yeah.
really strange songs that have odd lyrics, complex lyrics, and yet they would have the greatest hooks in them.
Yeah, his song "Every Breath You Take" I talked about in my first book, because I was looking for examples of mass media indoctrination into pathological relationship situations that are considered normal,
Yeah.
right? And so I used "Every Breath You Take," which from my research, he wrote after reading 1984 and was thinking about Orwellian, political surveillance. And he sort of added a bit of a romantic or sexual vibe into it. But it's a stalker,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and yet it's one of Rolling Stone's greatest love songs of
I
all
know,
time.
right?
It's like
I
what?
know. It's
And the other,
no,
sorry,
no.
go
It's just
ahead. Go ahead.
it's very weird. It's very weird. It's a very weird song, actually.
Oh, so weird, but so
So
compelling.
compelling,
Just
and
that, the
one
heartbeat
of the
that,
best bridges.
yeah,
And I said that to Sting,
yeah,
and Sting says that that's the best part of the song, which it is. I mean, it's
yeah.
unbelievable.
I heard that.
Yeah.
I noticed that. Yeah, yeah. It's fantastic. But and then the other song was "When a Man Loves a Woman." I mean, have you ever really listened to the lyrics to that? It's
I'm thinking about that
insane.
now.
When a man loves a woman, he'll basically do whatever she tells him to do. He'll sacrifice every bit of his dignity. He'll abandon his friends. He'll spend his last dime to give her what she needs. And Rick, he'll sleep out in the rain if she tells him that's the way it has to be. That's love? Come on, Percy.
Right. That is hilarious. I never, these songs just go by and you don't really think about what they mean.
Yeah.
I always laugh about. I think Kurt Cobain said, people don't even care what the lyrics are. It's, if they don't like the melody, they don't care what the lyrics are, and the Beatles documentary kind of they allude to these facts as well when they're working on the lyrics in the new documentary that the melody is king, and the lyrical content is they try to find things that fit the syllables that work with the melody.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely secondary, but there are those of us who pay close attention to it.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I I love when a song is expressing a sentiment that is actually obscured by the melody. So it's like a fortune cookie or something. There's this hidden message inside it that you don't get unless you're really paying attention. So all the people out on the dance floor flailing about, they're not hearing it, but me sitting in the corner all morose with my drink, I hear it. It gives me a sense of smug superiority.
Well, I love
One,
I love the people that are, like the Joni Mitchells that are able to write
yeah,
these incredible lyrics that with these absolutely beautiful melodies, sophisticated melodies with sophisticated lyrics that are so compelling. That's
yeah. Well, I think it was your video where you were talking about the Beatles documentary, and there was a scene you played where they were sort of just like humming along and trying inserting different words, but they were really working out the melody, and they'd work out the words later. And I think you put in a little text bubble saying every musician I've ever worked with, this is how
that's
they
right.
write a
That's right.
song. And I immediately thought of Elton John and Bernie Taupin, right? That starts with the lyric, and Elton reads it and then just sits down at a
Chris,
piano, and out comes the
he's the
song.
only one. That's the perfect example. And I got to meet Elton and Bernie here in Atlanta in a studio back in 2004. They were working on a record, and Elton came into the session that I was doing with a band called Jump Little Children, a band that he loved. And he came in and introduced himself to the band, and I was out of the room at the time. And he said, when you guys are done with your session, come on over to Studio A. So about 8 o'clock, we call over. Yes, can we come over? So we go over to the Studio A, and Elton is there with Bernie and a lot of the guys from his original band, the drummer Nigel. But I got to meet them, and and we talked about this. We talked about their process, and Bernie gives Elton the lyrics, and Elton goes out and improvises, and they record it, and he comes up with the song so quickly, which is mind-boggling. But when I had dinner with Joni Mitchell and asked her, I said, Joni, do you come up with the music first or the lyrics, or do you ever come? She says, I come up with the music first, and that's pretty much almost everyone. The Beatles came up with the music first. They sang the melody to it, and then they figured out what the lyrics were to the melody. And they would have placeholders.
What about the Stones? What about the Stones? I remember listening to Keith Richards' autobiography, and there was a lot about, like, they would have the song, and then he would go to the bathroom and shoot up some heroin and try to find the hook. I don't know if it's the whole melody or if it was just a particular guitar lick that was gonna, if it was just that. Do you know anything about their
They
process?
would typically, from what I know, they would come up with the music with the riffs. When he's talking about the hook, they come up with the lyrical hook for the song, for the chorus, whatever the chorus was going to be. So
ain't got no.
Yeah.
There's the hook,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
But I would imagine that Mick is very much into just improving over whatever the vamp is, that he would try a bunch of things. This is why I'd love to interview him. I want to ask him about what his process is, because people don't, I don't know of any Mick Jagger interviews. McCartney gets asked these questions a lot, but where are the people interviewing Mick Jagger and Keith Richards about their songwriting process?
It's got to be just because they're not accepting interviews, right? People are lined up out the door.
I would imagine, but maybe not. Maybe it's journalists don't think to ask these things. Who knows?
Mick, if you're listening to this podcast, reach out to Rick Beato or just call me and I'll put you in touch with Rick.
Please. I'm begging you.
Fat fucking chance of that. But that does lead into a question I wanted to ask you, which, now that you're definitely, you've got access to A-list musicians. Who's on your list? Who are your dream guests? So, you've already had Pat Metheny must have been one of your dream guests, from forever.
Yes.
And now you're saying, Mick. You'd have to probably interview Mick and Keith separately.
Yeah.
I don't imagine they'd sit down together.
I would love to interview Mick and Keith. I'd love to interview Paul McCartney and Ringo, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, but these separately though, David Gilmour, Roger Waters, all the, and then people, Waters. Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, a lot of the jazz legends I want to interview as well. So Peter Gabriel. Oh my God. Phil Collins. I would love to interview. There's just so many to go through.
And it's interesting and there's something about musicians that I find particularly interesting because it very much feels like the fame is accidental in a way. Maybe you think of counterexamples to this, but when I think of musicians that I really admire, I never have the sense that they were chasing fame. I have the sense that they were, Sting, I think he used the phrase that when he's writing a song, he sort of enters a state of grace. That there's a transcendental consciousness aspect to being such a committed musical artist that I feel like is antithetical to the ego of chasing fame. Am I naive about that?
No, I think you're right on.
Feel something along
I think
those
that fame is always accidental, and now do they accept being famous, or they want to be famous? Sure, I think that when Van Halen went out there and or the Police, or these people want to have hit records. Of course, they want to play in front of 30,000, 40,000 people, 100,000 people, but it's so unlikely that it'll happen that I don't think that's the motivator. I think that the people are. Eddie Van Halen was inspired, just was a genius on the guitar, and and they loved writing songs, and they loved playing, and that was the motivator always. And the fame is accidental. I agree with that. So
So how do you think the world of rock and roll would be different if guys like Eddie Van Halen and Hendrix and it just seems like every musician, when I read interviews with them and they talk about why they picked up a guitar, it was to try to get girls. So how would rock and roll be different if they got the girls without picking up a guitar?
that is a good question. I'm not sure about that. That is a great question.
They talk about women launching 1,000 ships. Well, how many bands did women launch?
Yeah.
I
Well, I think an equally interesting question is that how many or when did women stop being interested, or you look at a band like Rush that they always joke about there's no women that no women would go to their shows, right? But in the 80s, all the hair metal bands, my wife loved these bands as much as guys. Women loved the music as much as guys, and you'd go out to shows and it would be really equally split there. And I'd say the same for grunge too. My wife's favorite band is Pearl Jam, and so when did it start being, male dominated audiences for rock music? It probably was during the nu metal era, probably in the early 2000s or so. And why did these things happen? Why did did women not connect with, why did women connect with bands like, I don't know, Van Halen and not with, Linkin Park maybe? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if women like Linkin Park or not. If predominantly, if you go to these audiences from that, I just know that during the 80s you go out to concerts and it would really be equally split, the audience. Maybe not a Rush show, but
yeah. Well, I'm thinking about Rush because I've been to a few Rush shows, and I'm comparing Rush to Van Halen. I mean, you could say they're both like kind of power, rock and roll, man. But there's a sexiness to Van Halen that Rush. I don't think Rush ever wrote a love song.
Right.
I don't think there's a single Rush song about a woman, or a romantic relationship. It's all like politics and race cars and, Ayn Rand books.
Right.
It's like,
that's right.
I mean, it's pretty weird. Yeah. So my buddy Mike, who I mentioned earlier, who introduced me to Rush, had a question. I said, I'm going to talk to Rick again if you have a question. And I want to read you his question because it relates to Rush and this sort of era. He said, Pink Floyd, Electric ELP. What's ELP?
Electric Light Orchestra.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But what's the P? Anyway,
no, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. What am I talking about? Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah,
that's
Lake
what
and
it
Palmer.
is. Yeah, I thought it was ELO.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Pink Floyd, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Rush were the pinnacle of something. Interestingly, my kids who are in their 20s feel the same way. They're blown away by them. But is there anything like that now by their generation for that generation? Or is the genre itself dead? Same thing for Sting, Peter Gabriel, Brian Ferry. They made this very deep impression on me. Who are today's equivalents? Or is that era over?
Well, as far as progressive, so bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the progressive rock bands, there's a very robust progressive metal movement that is enjoyed by people like me. Bands like Animals as Leaders, Pliny, Periphery, Intervals, that are just fantastic instrumental music. Not all of it. Periphery has a vocalist, or Dream Theater, or Polyphia, another band that I had here in the studio recently, that are progressive bands that have big audiences, and that is a really vibrant genre right now. So those are the people that I would say that to check out, and these are bands that I really like a lot.
And are they doing what's the interaction between technology and music, in the sense that my impression is that a lot of the bands that Mike's talking about there were coming up at a time when the technology was changing very rapidly. So there were new kinds of amps and new pedals you could put on the guitar and new sounds you could create. And now, is there that level of change, or did it sort of plateau when it got computerized and now you can do anything, and in a way that's homogenizing?
Perfectly well put. Yes, they were inventing keyboards back then. I said this to Sting. You started having keyboards appearing on Ghost in the Machine, right, in 1980, 81, 83 on Synchronicity, because they were being invented at the time. And Sting laughed because it actually was true. They were inventing things. MIDI came out for keyboards then, but nowadays everything is done on with plugins for the most part on computers, and it has plateaued. I think it's not that people can't come up with new sounds, but you're familiar with these kind of sounds. Whereas back in the 80s, you hear Cars by Gary Newman that na 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 na. You hear those sounds like, wow, it just takes you right back to that time period,
Yeah. Yeah, or the Beatles like playing stuff backwards,
Right.
for the first
Right,
time.
inventing all these things. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. It is interesting how art is so much about the limitations, that creates the space within which you create the art. And when the limitations are taken away, it's like, well, now what do we do? It's like,
That is
it's
so
crazy.
true. I mean, the things that the Beatles did on 4 tracks, they recorded so many of their records on 4 tracks. When there were 8 tracks here in the United States, people had 8 tracks, and 16 tracks when the Beatles were recording on 8 tracks. Or think of Queen doing Bohemian Rhapsody with all those vocals on a 24 track and just bouncing and bouncing and bouncing with hundreds of vocals there, pre-mixing them onto 2 tracks in stereo so that they could open up more tracks to record on. And they would record, the drums, and they'd have some extra room mics, and then eventually they would hope to use them unless they had to use those tracks, but inevitably they would go over those tracks because they needed them for vocals or whatever parts. So nowadays you can open up 200 tracks and then people leave things for the last minute. Oh, we'll fix it in the mix or whatever. And I would get these sessions from some bands they'd send that I'd produced back when I was producing, and they'd bring in a session and have 150 tracks in it. And be like, what is this? You can even go through it. Like, why do you need all these parts? Just come up with the parts that you need and play them well, and it'll have a lot more impact.
Right. Yeah. Donald Fagen. Any chance of getting him
Oh my
on?
gosh.
I'd love to hear you talk with him.
I had a friend reach out to him that knows him, and he's not doing any interviews right now.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
Your guitarist buddy in L.A., the session
No,
musician?
I've another someone that knows him that has talked to him recently that I know, and I don't think he knows my channel or anything. I don't know if that would make any difference, but
Oh, it would. Of course it would.
I would hope so.
If he watched you unpacking Kid Charlemagne, he'd be knocking on your door in 10
Or else he'd
minutes,
be
man.
saying, "Wait a minute, where'd you get the tracks for that?"
That's right. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if anyone said this to you directly, but I imagine as an artist, to see someone with your level of care and expertise and enthusiasm unpacking your work, I mean, God, that's such a compliment. right? That must just feel fantastic, because so much, as you were saying with lyrics, and songwriters are like, yeah, they're not even listening to the lyrics, but I got to put the work in anyway. I mean, I feel that when I write a book, it's like, yeah, people kind of read some, they skim it, and then they form an opinion, and they're missing a lot of what I'm doing here. So to have somebody really unpack it the way you do must just feel really good for the artist.
Well, when I said to Sting, I asked him about this song, If I Ever Lose My Faith. I said, Sting, so in the first phrase you play this thing, do 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 do, and
Right.
and
I saw the way he
yes,
looked at you, dude,
and I said,
and he's like, you noticed
and I said,
that.
you don't play it on the other two phrases, and Dominic said, I never noticed that, and it's
Oh,
and he does it every time, only the first time around, except on the very last chorus. I went back and listened to it. Right before it goes into the last chorus, he plays it one more time. But I always just wait for that, and it only happens the first phrase on each verse. It's such a hook, though. And I know he did it on purpose, because the fact that he didn't do it he was doing it in a really specific spot there, and it really grabs. I think it grabs the listener, and they don't even realize it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. And I feel like we probably talked about this in our other conversations too, because it's something that I'm always wondering about when I watch your stuff. It's like, to what extent is the artist aware of what they're doing? I see you saying, no, look here, he came down, he did this Lydian chord, and then he went to the, the root of the C chord, and then he did the seventh sharp. And I'm picturing someone just like, oh, that sounds good. And then just sort of, it's almost like, it's like watching, a wide receiver make a fantastic catch, and you're like, and look at how he brought his left toe down inbounds, and he's got the ball. But the guy's not thinking that when he's in midair, going for the ball. It's like physical memory or instinct. Does that come into music?
Yes.
Are there instinctive things that they're not aware of that you see?
Yes, for rock musicians, pop musicians, R&B musicians, yes. For jazz musicians, no. Jazz musicians know every note that they play. They know why they play them. They know every note. Classical musicians, composers, when people say, see, Rick, Sting isn't thinking of these things. And I was like, well, Sting might not be thinking about these things, but I don't believe that that's true, because Sting is a jazz bass player. When I pressed him on it, about being Sting, well, you play jazz gigs, right? Yes. If you play bass and you play jazz gigs, you know every note that's in every chord that you play, because you're walking the notes of the chords, right? So you know what the fifth is on a C chord. You know it's G, and the third is E, and the root is C. You know a C7 has a B flat in it, of course, because you're outlining the chords as a bass player. So Sting definitely knows what he's doing. But does Kurt Cobain know that he's singing the ninth ear? No. He has just had a phenomenally good ear for music. But I like to say, it's like, even if he didn't know what he was doing, I know what he's doing. Now I'm going to explain to you what he's doing. But the fact that people have to be ignorant to the rules of music, or musical vocabulary, to be a great songwriter or be a great writer in general is ridiculous. Because who does Sting study? Bach, the greatest of them all. And all the greatest composers that have withstood the test of time, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Brahms, they all wrote and orchestrated these incredible bodies of work. And they knew exactly what every note meant, why it was on the page. They wrote them by hand, and because there was no recordings. That's the only way you could have your music played. So the greatest writers knew exactly what they were doing. So,
yeah, I remember that section of the conversation where Sting was being kind of modest and saying how he wished he had gone to conservatory and he hadn't really studied. And you're like, dude, you played in jazz bands, right? Like, he's like, oh yeah, I mean, I can read music,
right?
Yeah, okay.
Right. So then we went from that till, of course, I could read music, and people. I think that songwriters there is magic in this in a way. It comes from they're just messing. The thing about messing around, just improvising, that's a big part of it, and their ear just leads them to these beautiful melodic phrases because they just have great taste. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. They know what a great melody sounds like. They know where to leave space. They know where the rhythms should be, and they know how to put a lyric to it. And you know, I said to my friend Lee Sklar, who played with James Taylor and with Phil Collins, he's on thousands of records. I said to Lee, when you were playing with Phil Collins back in the mid 80s doing records, Phil would bring something in. It's like he was just minting gold. Everything he had was a hit. And was it like that, the first time that you're hearing these songs? Or, Sting going into Stewart and Andy and playing them the songs. But, even with these guys that had hit after hit after hit, it's still nerve-wracking. And Sting admitted to that it's nerve-wracking playing people your song for the first time. You don't know how people are going to react to it. And I think all musicians feel that way. It doesn't matter how successful they are. Look at George Harrison in the Get Back movie playing I Me Mine for John Lennon. He was terrified.
Yeah.
And this is
amazing.
10 years, 12 years into being in the Beatles.
Yeah, that documentary, I've only watched the first hour and a half or so, but it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Not only what we see about what's going on with them, but the way, as the viewer, it's I don't know how to articulate this, but it's like I kept wanting to help them, like say no, speed it up a little, and it's
well, you
it's,
knew where it was.
you
knew where it was going to be. Where it was ended up.
Well, that's it. And it's like you're watching someone give birth. There's that scene where Paul's just sort of sitting in front of George and Ringo, and they're looking bored, and he's just sort of like playing some chords, and you can hear "Get Back,"
just getting started.
JoJo,
yeah.
Tucson. Is Tucson in Arizona?
That's what John says. I love that. Wait, is Tucson in Arizona? Paul's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
It's the right number of syllables. It must be. Yeah, it's so, as someone who, anyone who does anything creative, I think it's so encouraging to see the process, how messy it is. I love that with writing when I see like a page from a famous novel, Hemingway or something, and it's all crossed out and words and arrows, and it's like, oh, it didn't just come out of his head as the sun also rises. Interesting.
I mean, Chris, when you're writing, do you type, or do you write by hand, or do you do a combination?
Combination, but mostly typing. Although I've been tempted to try to write a book by hand and see, but I think that would have to be a more creative book. I mean, the two books I've published are both science, so it's more about conveying information than telling stories. But I'm sort of toying around with a novel at this point, and I like how Hemingway wrote, which was on top of a refrigerator, standing up on yellow legal pads. I've toyed with doing that. The problem is I've been typing for so long that my handwriting is horrible.
I know. Me too now. I can barely write. It's trying to write. I have a notebook. I have a notebook right here that I was trying to write in, and I can barely form the letters now.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I leave signed checks for my mom when I'm traveling so she can handle stuff. I go through and sign, like my signature is completely inconsistent. Every check's different. It's like, well, I don't write. How am I? Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, given your sort of movement and progression in terms of a lot of the people you're interviewing, what about interviewing producers? I would love to hear you in conversation with Daniel Lanois, for example. Is that interesting, or do you
Absolutely.
think that would be too meta?
I actually had an interview scheduled with Daniel Lanois, and his brother passed away the week that it was going to happen. So in the future, I will definitely I would love to interview producers. There's a whole list of them, some of whom I've spoken with, but I feel like that the interviews, the ones I've done with the people in person, are so more engaging, and so I would like to do it that way if possible.
Yeah. Yeah, to be in your studio or in his studio where he can reach out and express something on the
Yeah,
piano if that's what is called for. Yeah, I agree with you. That's worth flying across the world, man.
absolutely. So that's a thing that I would like to, for next year. That's a thing that's on my list, is to start including more producers. Start including producers, since I haven't actually. I don't think I've interviewed any producers ever.
Because someone like Lanois and I don't know T-Bone Burnett, and
Amazing.
I'm sure there are many examples
Two
you
two
can think
perfect
of.
ones right there.
Well, and they're both very accomplished
Yep.
musicians themselves. I'm
Yes.
a huge fan of Lanois'
Me too.
music. The Maker,
Yes.
are you kidding
Yeah.
me? But have you ever taken apart one
I
of
have
his
not.
songs,
No. No.
deconstructed? Oh God, I love The Maker is one of my favorite songs. But what was I going to say? Oh, that they're both fantastic musicians, and their and maybe this is true of all producers, but I feel like their presence is so palpable in the album
Yes.
that it's as if what they called what's his name, the fifth Beatle, right? The producer actually created their sound. Not in. I noticed, and I agree with you. You said something about who was the guy with the crazy hair who
Phil
produced
Spector.
one of the Beatles? Phil Spector,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I mean, that kind of messed it up. I mean, but I feel like Lanois brings.
Yeah.
Like, have you heard Dylan's record that he
Yes.
produced?
Lanois is one of the greatest producers of all time. He just is a genius,
Oh,
absolute genius. And I really want to interview him. That would be
yeah, yeah.
a thrill.
He's amazing. Okay, I'm going down my list of things I wanted to talk to you about. Another idea I had, and I just want to like work for you, Rick. I mean, I want to, because you're so, you're, how can I say this? You're like the spoke of a wheel. You're introducing so many people to so many other people, to other people's work, right? You've got millions of people following you who may have never heard of Larry Carlton or something, and suddenly they're listening to everything they can find by Larry Carlton, right? Are there bands, like when you look for something to feature on your show, of course you're looking for classic stuff that a lot of people have heard and would be automatically interested in, Kid Charlemagne or Sting or whatever. But do you also look for something new that you want to, because now you've got a big enough audience that you can really boost someone's career if you feel that their music is worthy of this attention. So like I'm thinking of bands like Khruangbin or something. I don't know if you're familiar with them. But do you hear a new band and say, I want to, let's give them a boost, a Beato
Yeah.
boost?
The yes. But most of the bands that I've done that with are in that progressive metal scene. As far as the way that YouTube works is that every video has its own audience associated with it, right? So depending on how big the audience is really who these videos are going to go out to. And they may not appear in your feed if it's something that you don't know about. My video may not get recommended to you, even if you've subscribed to my channel. Like a lot of people that follow my channel just type in my name, which is pretty much how I go to people's YouTube channels. I just type their name in the search bar and they come up, even if I'm subscribed. But it takes too long for me to go through my subscription list because I'm subscribed to so many channels. It's easier for me to just find them, right? And then I realized that they released a video. It's like, well, why didn't I see it in my, in my subscriptions, or why didn't it pop up? Well, because YouTube might not think that I'm interested in this topic. Maybe it's a video on a specific thing. And so sometimes the audience, so if I introduce a band that people don't know, like there's a band that I made a video on that I produced called Crowfield. This is about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. A record that I really loved that I did. There was the only band that I signed on my record label with a dear friend of mine who passed away back in 2011, Johnny Diamond. We did this. We started a label together. We had this artist, Crowfield, and made this record that I love listening to. And I did a video, what makes this song great, on this particular song called Cardinal Motion, but nobody really watched it because they were unknown. And so there are limits to what you can do. Now, could I try it again? Would I have a different result now, 2 years later? Maybe, but I don't know. I'd have to. If there's not some constituency out there for a particular artist, YouTube doesn't know who to push it to.
Yeah, YouTube is strange. I'm amazed at how bad the YouTube algorithm seems to be, given how far into internet world we are. But I watch a lot of YouTube, and I go to YouTube, and there are videos I watched 3 weeks ago. I've watched the whole thing, and it's still popping up on my home page. Like, why? I already watched it. It makes no sense to me. And a lot of stuff that I'm not interested in. I've never watched it. It's
weird. Funny because I think, how does YouTube know that I like this? Wow. Or my younger brother will say, I said, John, have you seen this video? Yeah, I just got recommended the other day. I watched it. And I think, oh my gosh, how does this know?
Well, they know you better than they know me. They've got the wrong impression of me. They think I have no short-term memory.
It depends on what kind of things you're looking up, though. And it really is I mean, I'm kind of a weird person with recommendations. I have such specific, I go specifically to certain places to look for stuff. And then I'm looking up live versions of songs that I love. That's my thing. I'm always looking for live. Somebody sent me a Beatles, somebody sent me a, who sent this to me now? Did you send it to me? Somebody sent me a live concert from 1965. It was some award show or something. The Stones were on it, the Beatles were on it, and playing multiple songs. It was amazing. I mean, it was really, really amazing. And when the Beatles came out, they did the first song. I can't remember what the first song was, but the McCartney and Harrison's mic was not working, so John Lennon was singing with no harmonies. And they figured it out by, one song into it. McCartney went over and sang the harmonies on Lennon's mic with him, like pros. Like they immediately knew their voice wasn't out front. What did they do? He just went over the other mic, and it was nothing. And they did that. But I'd never seen this video before. It's amazing how much stuff is out there, how much great stuff is out there.
Yeah, and that was another thing, another impression from that Beatles thing, like how hard you mentioned this in your analysis of it, but how hard they worked, that they came in 10 to 6. They worked, they showed up, they put in the hours. And I think you mentioned this as well. They were in their mid-20s. Nobody was 30 when they broke up. So at the end of the Beatles, nobody had, but they were pros. They'd been doing it forever.
Total pros.
It's crazy.
Somebody said, Ringo was 30. Actually, Lennon quit the band. I believe it was on April 10th. 1970, told him he was leaving the band. And I think Ringo turned 30 in May, and then Lennon turned 30 in October. George Harrison was 26 or something. I mean, not even close to 30 at the time. It's remarkable,
Unbelievable.
right? I mean, Sting, to put it in perspective, was 27 when the first Police record came out, and Andy Summers was 35. So, or
Wow.
36, 36.
So the other day I was driving through, I was driving to LA and come through Joshua Tree. I've got a friend who lives out there and spent some time in the desert. And every time I drive through Joshua Tree, I put on that
You
album.
should.
Dude, it's, I mean,
So good.
there's just
Yeah.
amazing, just
Yeah.
amazing. And by the way, I mean, who gives a shit what I think about guitarists? But I appreciate your respect
The
for
Edge.
the
Oh, one of my
Edge.
favorite guitar players.
Yeah,
End of story.
yeah,
Genius.
and I know you've said like, oh, people say he's just a rhythm guitarist or he's just this or he just has, but I mean, he creates mood like
Oh,
nobody.
oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
just the oh, so I was driving through Joshua Tree, listening to I don't know if his streets have no name or I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and the I was struck as I always am by how the desert is created on that record.
Yes.
There's so much empty space and vastness,
Yes.
and it led me to think about, of course, Daniel Lanois, his brilliance. And I think they recorded it in Joshua Tree, didn't they, at a studio out there?
I'm not sure. I want to say that they did some of the recording at Windmill Lane in Ireland. From what I know, the one thing about Joshua Tree, there's no pictures at all that I've ever seen from the recording session, and that's
Huh.
really unusual because on the making of Unforgettable Fire, they did a documentary and you can see Lanois and Brian Eno in it, and then they're at Slane Castle, and then on Achtung Baby, there's a lot of footage from. They had a photographer come in when they were in Berlin for Rolling Stone. They took a lot of Anton Corbijn had a lot of pictures from that, but I don't know much about the recording of Joshua Tree, which is why I really want to interview Bono and the Edge. I want to interview all of you too, and I want to talk
Yeah.
about these things because
Yeah.
I'm absolutely fascinated because I think they had a very similar way that they worked on songs to the Beatles. Although the Beatles would come in with finished
Mm,
songs,
mm,
and I mean a lot of look, you see those things with the Beatles, they're just writing the stuff there in the studio, a lot of it, and that's what you two did.
yeah. Yeah. At a certain point, you become a historian, Rick. Because you're getting oral history from these people who are still alive about this work of historical importance, and you're asking them questions that journalists just aren't going to ask because they don't know to
They don't know to
ask.
ask.
It's
Yeah,
a language they don't speak. It makes your work it takes your work definitely, far from entertainment only into something I think of much more lasting importance. It's it's fantastic. But what I was getting at was the Joshua Tree I think really captures that sense of the desert, and then I was thinking, what other examples are there of music that is like landscape painting, that I thought of the New World Symphony, right?
yeah.
Dvorak using slave tunes and sort of trying to create this energy of America at that time. I thought of Bach and the sort of ornate architecture of the cathedrals that he was playing in. Ali Farka Touré, the kind of open, or do you know what's the name of the band? The Tuareg band. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh yeah, they're wild. They're these nomadic people of the Sahara who are sort of like gypsies. Like they don't have a particular nationality. They just traditionally move in camel caravans across, and they had solar panels and electric guitars and amps, and they'd sit out there in the desert and fucking rock out. Amazing band. I'll send you a link. I forget the name right now. Lots of people are screaming it into their devices at the moment, but I can't remember what. But I have several of their records. They performed on the Colbert Report. That was a really
Okay.
interesting little performance. Anyway, so what comes to mind for you? Are there?
One of the
I mean, reggae kind of captures tropics in a way,
Well,
right?
one of the first programmatic records is or pieces of music is Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral, which is sounds like nature. It's one of the most beautiful pieces that I've ever heard, and I think Beethoven's music really does that for me. But that particular piece is, I just, I just think of being out in nature when I hear it. It's just mind-bogglingly beautiful. And
Yeah.
and to think that Beethoven, the circumstances that he was writing this music, under are just mind bending to me. That somebody could be having profound hearing loss and be writing this beautiful, beautiful music just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's incredible. Oh, by the way, the band is Tinariwen.
Okay.
That's what I was talking
Okay.
about. The Tuaregs, Tinariwen. They're amazing. Check them out. Yeah, you mentioned Beethoven. I was thinking Mahler did that too. Mahler
Exactly.
incorporated bird song
Yep.
into his music. I went through a heavy Mahler phase.
Everybody needs to go through a heavy
college.
Mahler phase.
and then get out of it. It's kind of like a Rush phase. Mahler is like the Rush of classical
Absolutely.
music,
I mean, if you want to learn about how to orchestrate, Mahler is a great. I mean, I'm such a big fan of the Romantic era, and I mean, I'm a huge classical music fan as much as I am a jazz music fan, and I find myself when I don't know what to listen to, I always go back and listen to, classical pieces that I'm either familiar with or not familiar with, and I probably find the most joy out of that. Try to discover pieces by my favorite composers that I'm not familiar with. Bach had
Yeah.
1,120 some odd cataloged pieces, and
Yeah.
so much to hear.
Do you appreciate the Glenn Gould?
I love
Like
Glenn.
the way he played
Oh my
Bach?
God, I love Glenn Gould. Someone was asking me. Somebody
me
wrote
too.
to me yesterday, as a matter of fact, about Glenn Gould, and said that Glenn Gould and Miles Davis were on Columbia Records and were in the same studios at the same time, and was wondering if I had heard if I knew of them ever meeting or knew anything about that. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know of them meeting, but I'd be curious to know if they met. That I can't imagine Glenn
Birds
Gould,
of a feather.
and Miles Davis together in a room. That would be a video.
I wonder if they would appreciate each other because they're so similar.
Yeah.
Right? They're such obstinate characters. Nobody's going to tell me how to do my thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in a way, they're very similar. Do you ever hear Miles Davis cover of Cyndi Lauper's "Time
Love
After
it.
Time"?
It's amazing.
Oh God.
Yes.
I don't know how many covers he did. I imagine not many, but damn, he really gets the juice out
Yeah,
of that
that
one.
is
It's
a
so
great
good.
cover.
Yeah. Oh shit! What was I going to ask you? Oh, we're talking about classical music. Yeah, I think we talked about the late Beethoven quartets on an earlier podcast. That's one of my favorite things to listen to. The four of them. You ever read The Unbearable Lightness of Being?
I did not read it, but I saw the movie.
Yeah.
It's nothing to say to an author. No, I don't know. I never saw the movie and I never read it.
No. I mean, the movie's good. The movie's all right. It's Daniel Day-Lewis, Juliette Binoche. Interesting approach to the book, but I think if you ever feel like reading a novel, and you probably have a long list on your waiting list already, but it's a very musical novel. Kundera's father was a composer, and I think he conducted a symphony in Czechoslovakia, and he grew up around music. And there's a part of the book that's where he discusses the late Beethoven quartets, and there's apparently a note in the side of the page where Beethoven wrote, "Muss es sein? Ja, es muss sein," meaning, must it be? Yes, it must be. And so Kundera is sort of like, okay, what exactly was he talking about here? You know, he's this old man, he's totally deaf, he's this beautiful, mournful, passionate music. Really interesting. And another thing I wanted to just say to you, I really appreciated the video you put out recently about is it September 15th?
Yes, Pat Metheny, Lyle Mays off of As Falls Wichita, that record.
Man, so you know, when you and I were both bouncing around upstate New York, that was my Mahler phase. I was coming out of my Rush phase, and I was right in the middle of my Magic Mushroom phase. And when I was coming down from a trip, I would go to my room and put on that record. And that was my go-to record. When I'm coming in for a landing, my mind is wide open, and I just want to sort of focus my mind and relax and move towards sleep, but have something. So I'd either listen to Bach or the Beethoven quartets or As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita. I've listened to that thousands of times. Oh my God, what a record.
Incredible record.
Do you know, so the title track, which is like 20 minutes long, there's a section in the middle where they say numbers.
Yes.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
7.
Yeah. I have no idea.
24.
I have no idea.
No idea.
No.
All right. They're not prime numbers. I can't find any, I don't know if there's a correspondence to chords or something that they're
I'm going to
doing.
hopefully interview Pat again, and I will ask him that.
Oh, please.
Yeah. Because we did not even get to that record really in the interview.
Yeah.
So I want to really talk about that, and that was an important video to make for me, that particular song. It was hard. I had to make the video, have it blocked, and then ECM Records unblocked it for me because they don't allow anything on YouTube, and which is a shame.
Really?
But there's a bunch of Pat songs that I'd like to talk about. Keith Jarrett as well, that are on ECM Records, and
right.
But that particular song, September 15th, it's funny, Chris. I never thought about how to play that song. I never figured it out. I only listened to it as a listener. Like I do everything. I think people think that because I can figure out things really easily that I figure out everything and I analyze it, but I never do that. I just listen to music unless I have to. Unless I'm going to teach it. I've been listening to that record forever. I've heard September 15th thousands of times. I never thought about, how do you play that? And
well, that's the key to your success, dude. That you are totally educated and fluent in the technical aspects of the music, but you're experience of it is purely as a listener. And then you come and explain
Right.
it, either to yourself or to your audience. But what makes it so fun to watch you is that you are having so much fucking
Well,
fun.
because I'm learning the
You
thing.
you love
I know
it.
I'm learning it then. I'm thinking, I can't believe that I've never played this before. That's what it is. Wow. And then I'm listening to it as I'm playing along with it. And I've always wanted to play along with it, Chris, and I just never did because I don't know why. Because I enjoyed listening to it so much. To the act of actually playing it would interrupt my experience of listening to it.
Maybe it's like the girl who's so pretty you don't even want to ask her
Right.
out. You just want to let her be pretty and just enjoy that, you know?
Yeah.
There's
I
something, maybe it's some kind of respect
yeah,
thing.
I think the song is so beautiful that I just zone out and I just get into it. And it never occurs to me what the chords are, nothing, what the melody is. It My son Dylan, I always, he's got the incredibly great ear, perfect pitch. And, I would always say to him, Dylan, do you think about the notes when you hear it? And when he was a little kid, he said, no, only when you ask me. It never occurs to me. It just, and it's just, and I thought about it. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much like me. Unless I have to figure it out, I never analyze anything. I just enjoy it as a fan.
It's a great gift to have both of those. The ability to see, I mean, I guess it's like a surgeon or something. You don't look at people and picture their internal organs, right?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. All right. So listen, the last question I want to ask you, I don't want to take too much of your time, but every time I'm struck by how lucky you are, dude. You're so lucky. And I know you worked your ass off. You're still working your ass off. I can't keep up with the volume of stuff you're putting out. I don't even watch your live streams and all that. Like, who's got time,
No.
man? But you are incredibly lucky because you're a bird who gets to fly for a living, right? I mean, you're doing what you really want to do. If you couldn't do this though, if you couldn't have a life in music, what do you think you'd be doing? What other passions do you have that we don't hear about because your thing's all about music publicly?
I love science. I love when I watch things on YouTube. I love astronomy.
Ah,
Yeah, but I love science documentaries about anything. About anything. I'm fascinated by science. My wife has her degree is in biology. She works in a lab, and when we met, she owned a telescope and like a big telescope, and I thought, cool, that's awesome. You know?
right. Yeah. Yeah. You ever read Richard Feynman? You familiar with
Yes,
him?
yeah,
Yeah. Because there is this overlap of genius musician and genius
yes,
scientist,
yeah.
right? I mean, my buddy Mike that I keep mentioning is an engineer and speaks 5 languages fluently, and he always says it's like it's all the same. It's patterns, it's pattern recognition and replication, and whether it's engineering or math or Russian or German or music, it's just systems. And it's like, okay, man, if you say so.
Right. Whatever you say, Mike. No, it's.
Whatever you
I
say, Mike.
understand that. I do understand that, though. I understand that. But the idea of not being a musician, though. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Don't want to bring you down
No.
to that. Yeah,
I'm the
no, I'm
luckiest
just
person in the world here, Chris. So
you are,
I
dude. You
am.
really are, and the fact that so much of it sort of, at least from outside, it looks like a lot of it was triggered by that video you did with Dylan.
Yeah.
And he's so fucking cute and so smart and so cool, and it's like it's a really good introduction to you as well, because we see you as a dad, We see you as a teacher. We see you've got a cool family, and you know, sometimes you'll see one of the kids wander into the
Right.
back of your shot or
I know,
something.
right.
It's like, oh man, this
I
is
always leave
awesome.
those in.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to take up more of your time. I really appreciate the time you set aside for
Thanks,
this,
Chris.
and
Always
I
love talking
recommend
to
your
you.
stuff every chance I get. I'm turning people on. I don't think I'm personally responsible for the additional million
Pretty much,
viewers
though,
that
if
have.
I had to say, no, I really, Chris, I really value our friendship, and thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Always great.
Yeah. Hey, dude, we gotta meet
I know.
someday though. This is the third one we've done online, but I want to be in a room with you. I want you to teach me to be a great guitarist
Anytime, anytime. Let's do
in an
it.
hour,
Let's do it.
because after an hour I lose interest. So. All right, man. Thanks. I'm gonna stop
Thanks,
recording.
Chris.